2.
Welcome to the Redlands Camera Club. Tonight's speaker, Andrew Hertel, drove up from his home in San Diego. He focuses on black and white nature photography. His work is shaped by time spent in wild places, deserts, mountains, and coastlines, often explored on foot, by bicycle, or motorcycle. These experiences are about being immersed in the landscape, feeling small, connected, and alive. Though Andrew grew up in the Midwest, it was in open spaces of the West Coast that pulled him in and changed the course of his life. He is self-taught, and much of his photography is driven by instinct, emotion, and a deep respect for the natural world. Over the years, he's developed a style rooted in contrast, simplicity, and mood, creating images that feel both intimate and expansive. Alongside his fine art work, he leads immersive photography workshops in extraordinary landscapes, guiding photographers of all levels to slow down, connect with their surroundings, and find their own creative vision. In tonight's presentation, Andrew will explore how black and white photography can move beyond simple beauty and become a powerful tool for emotional expression. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me. Bear with me if it takes me a few seconds to get to do this 2 at a time here. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the nice introduction there. A little bit more about me, but she pretty much covered most of it. Tonight's talk, it's not going to be so much of a technical deep dive or a history of black and white photography. It's more how we can use our photography, specifically in the landscape, to project more emotion. Did I do mess it up already? Nope. All right. And whether you're a long-time monochrome shooter or just curious, we're going to explore how removing color can actually bring us closer to the emotional core of the scene. We're not going to hear much on like the rule of thirds and all that kind of stuff, although those are useful and we need to know them. And I use them as well. That's not the whole point of this presentation. What I want to focus on is how to make images that feel like something, images that carry emotion and reflect something personal back to you and your viewers of your images. Okay. All right. I personally don't consider myself a documentary photographer. I'm not generally, when I go out, it's not in my head to show exactly what something looked like or how the scene was. I generally try to portray how I felt the scene. And black and white is the method that I use to do that. For me, it strips down distractions, and it lets me focus on light, form, texture, patterns, and emotions in the scenes. And I make choices specifically out in the field when I'm doing this to reflect how I'm experiencing where I am and what I'm photographing. And for me, black and white isn't just an aesthetic. It truly is a way of seeing, and I've learned how to kind of see the world in this way. By removing the color, even in a scene where the color is the obvious draw, we're forced to focus on something else, the moment, the light, again, the shapes, the forms. And it's black and white's not just a stylistic choice, it's a way of seeing, like I mentioned. And it's not that I think black and white is better, it's just sometimes it's the right choice for me, and it's how I see things and the language that I want to use to portray my art and how I see the world. Good. Okay. This scene here, where I was talking to a couple of people earlier about Lake Hodges. This is from Lake Hodges, a sunrise in the morning. And it's, it had this beautiful golden light coming above this hill behind the egret there. And I thought, it's a very beautiful scene. It's quite simple. But the focus in the color scene here is a little bit more on the sunlight and the warmth of the sunlight. And for me, I wanted to focus on the bird. And I wanted to make the bird the focus of everything. and the color, version does work. It's calm, it's natural, it's beautiful for sure. But the color for me was again distracting from the bird and what the subject of it. So that was my vision of when I was there and what I saw, and once I removed the color, the emotional pull of the image got a little bit stronger, and the bird itself is not competing with the warm tones of the sunrise. It becomes the focal point of the image, and then the fog from the water is kind of secondary, and the trees are another supporting part of the picture. And this is a good example of black and white isn't just a conversion, it's a choice to simplify the scene, to strip the image down to the story I wanted to tell. And here the story is the stillness and the elegance and the presence of the bird and the elements. This very famous viewing area in Yosemite, it's called Valley View. This was from a very cold February morning. Again, the color image, it's a very beautiful image. It's very postcard worthy, if you will. But again, it's not how I felt when I was there. And there's nothing wrong with the color version, but again, it's not my vision and not my voice. So I wanted to highlight the softness in the colors in the background. I really wanted to highlight the textures in the grass in the foreground, in the water, and then of course the texture in the granite. And so in the final version, this is when I converted it. I kind of started feeling my fingers that were frozen when I was standing there. The dark trees, the soft river textures, the granite walls. The contrast kind of helps organize the subtle details and brought a quiet strength to the image. The black and white to me gives the scene a little bit deeper sense of stillness and solitude. A better reflection of how the morning felt to me, the cold air and the soft light and the gentle sounds of the river. Can you all hear me okay, by the way?
A little bit louder.
A little bit, I'll try. I'm very soft-spoken by nature, so I'll
Talk
try.
to the back of the room.
Okay. And for me, that's, the beauty of the black and white. It's not just about simplifying, but amplifying emotion by stripping the image down to its essentials. And removing the color is a big way to do that. Let's see here. So, we're still synced up. When I talk about emotion in photography, I don't mean like adding a dramatic sky in Photoshop or making every photo dark and moody. I mean, making images that feel like something, and often it's not loud or obvious. It's subtle, it's quiet, and it lingers. And you'll see that in a lot of my work. And I find black and white is very powerful for this. When you strip away the color, again, you can remove the distractions, and what you're left with is light, shadow, contrast, shapes, patterns, the kind of building blocks of emotional expression. It lets the subject speak more directly. It invites the viewer to lean in, to wonder, to feel something, even if they can't name exactly what it is that they're feeling. And that's the kind of work that I want to make, and not just pretty pictures, not just correct compositions, but images that say something, sometimes even if it's just a whisper. Let's see here. Mood versus emotion. They're not really the same thing, specifically in photography, but they kind of get confused a lot, especially with black and white photography. You'll often see an image that's been drastically darkened and kind of boom, it's a moody image. And that's not necessarily a wrong thing. Mood can be created with darkness or tone, but does that carry an emotion to it? Or is it just a moody image? Mood is generally about the atmosphere, the light, the tone, the feel of the place, the feeling you get before you even fully understand what you're looking at. Emotion goes deeper. It makes the viewer stop. It's not just about how the image looks, but it's how it connects with the viewer, what it says, what it makes you feel, and not just for that moment, but after you've looked at the image and walked away from the image. Sometimes the images have both. They have mood that draws you in and emotion that keeps you there and lingers with you. Let's see here. This image is dark and moody and dramatic. It's bold light, strong contrast, texture, a ton of visual impact, even a little bit of mystery. This is one of my favorite images from my Aeolian Dune series from Death Valley. But is this image emotional? And I don't know. Maybe to me, probably not, but maybe to somebody else, which is kind of the beauty of art, right? To one person, it's one thing, and another person, it's another. How do I brighten this? And again, it can be easy to confuse mood with emotion, especially in black and white. Moody doesn't always mean a meaningful image. It can just mean a moody image. But they can be very powerful when they're moody, but does it connect on a deeper level? And that's kind of me and how I work with my work, as I kind of go back and forth and ask those questions on images that I want to be one of those emotional images and have that feeling for the viewer. This is another image from my Death Valley Aeolian Dune series. It's soft, it's clean, it's very peaceful, and it's a very pretty image. I do love, it's one of my favorite color images that I have. The light is very nice. Again, the soft kind of pastel color palette here. But for me, that's kind of where it stops, is it's just a pretty image in my catalog there. For me, it doesn't have the emotional pull that I wanted to get from some of these images. But I'll get there once I convert it to black and white. But again, some people, this is their image and they will stop there, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, I want to go deeper into it. So there's the first version of it. It's a little bit softer. There's not a ton of harsh contrast to it, which allows kind of the shapes and the textures of the sand to stand out. There's a mood to it, but again, is there any emotion to it? I don't know, not yet. At least not in the way that I'm thinking of emotional impact in the image. And that's okay, not every image has to have that, but again, while I was there, I knew in my head what I was working on and what I wanted to get. So same space, just a different focal length to get more of the surrounding area and to add more texture, add more shapes. The two small bushes in the foreground there give a little bit of life to the image. Get more harsh contrast with the shadows. Excuse me, and again, some taking away the color. Your eyes often explore more throughout an image, whereas we're drawn to certain colors, and oftentimes you're looking at a color image, your eyes can kind of stop because you focus on a point. So again, in this one, zooming out, there's just much more room for the eyes to wander through the image. And to me, this one has just much more feeling to it and more of what I was going for on that day. So how do we actually get to have emotion in our images? How do we move just past pretty images? There's no formula, no checklist. It's not always clear while you were there. Sometimes it happens, once you get back to the computer. Sometimes it doesn't happen until you've looked at the image for the 13th time and then it clicks. This is what I want to do. And that's what the next few sections we're going to talk about, the building kind of more of the connection and simplifying with intention, using light as a tool, making room for story or mystery in our images. One of the best ways I have found to bring emotion into my work is to simplify. I'm a huge fan of having less distractions in my images. And that doesn't mean it has to be a minimal image with nothing in it. It just means removing as many distractions as possible and making space for the feeling to come through. When a composition is clean, your eyes can settle in the frame. They're not bouncing around, getting distracted by tons of different things in the frame. You're not fighting that frame. You're relaxing and actually getting to see what's in there. And that's when the mood and the emotion kind of has the room to breathe. This is from Eureka Dunes in Death Valley, one of my favorite areas there. And you can see the kind of the full structure of this, massive dune in the background and the smaller ridges in the foreground there. And I like how you can see a little bit of the Saline Ridge Mountains in the background. It gives it a good sense of scale and place. And it's a good image. I love this image, but it's not necessarily an emotional or a moody image. It's just a nice black and white image of a place. And it doesn't really ask anything. It's just, again, another pretty image of a place. And this image is about the place, not necessarily from the place. And that difference also matters to me. I try to take pictures from a place, not of a place, if that makes sense. I want the viewer to feel like they're there with me, experiencing it with me. So this is from, again, same location, just using a different focal length to tell a completely different story. And I wanted to zoom in on the folds and the texture, and you can highlight and see just, again, a little bit of the grass sticking out of the sand. That gives it a little bit of life in the image. And what I love about this version, to me, again, it feels more alive. There's more texture. There's a little bit more mystery than the one before that showed the whole scene. The ripples in the sand and some faint grass there catching the sunlight again, like I said. There's no grand view here, but to me, this has more feeling than the big view that we saw in the previous version. And again, this one is a little bit more simple, so the eye can kind of lazily go through the image and take in everything that's in the one frame there. And that's kind of what I mean by simplifying to strengthen, is going from, big, wide focal length and coming down and down and down sometimes can help. And this one, most people don't believe me, but this one is from San Diego County. Up in Mount Laguna, we get a little snow there maybe once a year, which is nice. And every time it does, I head out there. I just have to. It's amazing. And that's part of when I know it's going to snow out there. I'm already excited. I know what I'm kind of in that giddy, emotional, excited state, and I hope that the conditions will allow for an image like this when I go up there. So I kind of have some expectation, which I try not to put on myself, but when I see these days, I can't help it. And this image here, what really pulled me in was the shape of the two lower branches that kind of almost look like they're, hugging each other in a way, or trying to. And that was kind of contrasting with the upper branches that are full of the needles. And then there was snow falling in the background, which just made everything in the background just kind of disappear. And so you're really focusing on that tree, but yet there's still a little bit of a supporting cast in the background, if you will. How do I do this? Go. And there's, you know, some stillness here, there's some life here, there's also shapes and there's contrast. So there's a lot going on here. And I think when you look at this one, you can feel how cold it was there, which it was. Let's see here. This image is from Japan from 2 years ago. And if you look at it, it's a very simple image. I mean, there's not much to it. There's a hillside, a tree, tracks, and a background. But for me, there's a lot going on here, and there's a story here. So while there's only 4 elements into it, and it's a very minimal, if you will, you know, it's a quiet, kind of powerful composition, if you will. You know, it's with the tracks from the animal. Was it going? Was it coming? Why was it by itself? Where was it going? Where was it coming from? So it, you know, it can tell a story, but it also leaves the viewer to tell their own story. You know, I was there, I know what was going on, but when viewers see this, you know, they can come up with their own stories as well, which is often fun in photography. And we don't necessarily have to tell exactly what's going on. We just need to give enough for somebody to want to view it and linger and see what's going on there. And sadly, the tree is no longer there. My guide told me like 2 months after I left that the farmer got permission and cut the tree down. So that is another example of, even when the conditions aren't perfect, take the shot anyways. Because you never know if you can do it again, or the tree might, you know, I had plans to go back, but that's not going to work out. So always take it when you're there, when you can. This is from Joshua Tree. I don't know, assuming you guys are close enough, you've all been there. For me personally, Joshua Tree is very visually overwhelming. It's extremely vast, and as you can see from my work, I'm a little bit more tighter and intimate, and my brain often doesn't know how to deal with a wide open desert. I just don't know how to frame it. So I love the Jumbo Rocks area. I'd love to go around there, explore, and find compositions like this. Looking at the textures in the rocks, the shapes of the rocks. And it's fun to just walk around and kind of let my brain be free to see those. And this is one of the ones where I was walking around and I came around a corner and I saw this composition, and I knew that was my afternoon. That's where I was going to spend. And it's very simple. It's 2 rocks, a tree, and a little bit of foreground, but there's a lot going on. There is a story here. You know, in the color image, the sky is pretty boring, but in the black and white, it's there, but it's a supporting cast member, if you will. It doesn't compete for any of the frame, but yet it gives a little bit more light and contrast to the image. And again, this is where, I mean, I love simplification. It's a simple scene, but it's not an empty scene. There's plenty going on here. The emotion in this image for me comes from the way the tree is leaning against, you know, one of the rock there, and you can barely see the shadow. That kind of shows you that it is leaning and touching the rock, kind of like it almost needs a little bit of that support. And in a harsh environment like Joshua Tree, to me, this is kind of a more kind of softer, you know, image of the elements. And that's another reason why I love this one. Let's see here. Light as emotion. Light does a lot more than just expose a scene. It kind of shapes how an image feels. Harsh light, soft light, side light, no light. Each one brings something different. And I personally don't really believe that there's any bad light. It's light, and we use it how it's given to us. Most of my images don't have perfect light, but they have the right light for the image that I'm trying to convey and the way that I'm going to capture that scene. So This is another one from Eureka Dunes. This was about 3 hours before sunset. And I was out there, I was with my, I lead workshops out there. And we went out there in plenty of time to kind of get out there and relax. And, it's very harsh light, kind of like when it was coming through the window here. And everyone's just kind of standing around. And I'm thinking, this is beautiful light. Like the way that it's hitting these sand dunes and it's creating this harsh contrast so that you can see the definition and all the ridges and the ripples of the sand, excuse me, and you can see the texture. So, and it's showing people how to see, we always have heard that you have to photograph, in a golden hour light. Like harsh light, I love harsh light, especially in places where you can use it to your advantage and you can pick up the textures and shapes of something, and you can use that contrast to highlight something in a scene or kind of hide something in the scene if you don't want those shadows. Let's see here. Another one from Mount Laguna in San Diego. Most people don't believe me when I tell them that either. This was just after sunrise. This shot took me a little over 2 years to get, just because we don't get cold enough temperatures around here. But I knew what I wanted. I wanted to catch the bird's breath, but I needed the light to come from behind at sunrise at a lower angle to get it. So I went out many, many times, and my wife thought I was crazy because I was going to sit in the snow and wait for birds, but I love it. It was just me out there. I couldn't have been more happy. But again, I needed, yes?
I was just going to ask you, is that the image that you envisioned before you took it, or you were just looking for that special?
I had seen it before on accident when I was out, and I got like a little like, holy crap, I think that's like some bird's breath. And then and it was, and so I researched, and it is a thing, and so I went back to try to get it. Yeah. But you need kind of the right conditions, and you need a little, especially in this place, because you're in the mountains, you have to wait for the sun to get over the mountain in the background, which is kind of harsh light, and people pack up and go home. But I needed that harsh light to get this image. So again, that's where knowing how to use different kinds of light to your advantage can pay off. And in addition to the bird's breath, which is cool and I love it, there's a stillness and a coldness to this image, but it's one of my favorite images, but I'm also biased because it took me forever to get it. And it's called hymn number 23 because when I got out of my truck that morning, it was 23 degrees out.
Andrew, we had a question on Zoom about your ratio. They all seem to be a very certain
4x5.
4x5.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm digital, but I love the 4x5. If I could go back in time, I would be a 4x5, medium format photographer. I just love that look. So when I'm in the field, 4x5.
What time of year was that bird?
That would, I think it was in January of like maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
So the redwings are still hanging around.
What's that?
The red-winged blackbird was still hanging around.
They pretty much in that area pretty much stay all year because, like I said, it doesn't snow often, and if it does, it's usually only there for like 2 days. Yeah. This one is another one from my trip to Japan. Just 10 minutes before I took this image, the background, it was completely flat. There was absolutely zero light. Snow was falling, but I could see a little bit of a break. You cross your fingers and hope, and sure enough, the sun broke through, the clouds parted for about 10 minutes, and came away with this beautiful image. And it kind of was like that for a while. So had I just thought, it's a snowy day out, it's gloomy, I'm just not going to go out, I would have missed a beautiful day. It was the same day as the other tree I showed you earlier. So Again, try to, take a gamble. Even you'll see some other images where I love gloomy days, kind of those gloomy days. I love them. They're wonderful for emotional black and white photography. This one is in La Jolla in San Diego, and it's called Bird Rock. It's a pretty well-known formation. And I'd seen this many of times, and I had this vision in my head of what I wanted to get, but I needed that day where the marine layer just didn't go away. And so one day I saw it and I rushed over there. But again, I knew what I wanted, but I needed one of those gloomy days, those days where every other photographer doesn't even get out of bed. Was the day that I was looking forward to. So again, learning how to use kind of that flat light to isolate, your subject and make your subject really stand out. You probably can't see it there, but I also used a longer shutter. It was like 30 seconds. So some of the birds are a little bit blurry. And I love that because it gives it, again, a little bit of contrast because some of the birds are, tacked still and a couple of them are blurry from moving. So it gives it a little bit of life instead of having just rows of completely still birds in it. Am I doing all right on time?
Not even 8.
All right.
Do you typically use a tripod then if you had a long shutter?
Yeah, anything over like a half a second.
Or is it like in all your other photos?
I try not to use the tripod as much as possible,
Only the specifics.
but if I need it, I use the tool. I'm not going to not use it just to be stubborn, but I like the freedom to kind of just let my eyes and then, ooh, there it is. Where if you're on a tripod, you put it down and you don't move it. A lot of us are guilty of that. So generally the tripod, I put it over here and then I walk around like this. And then that's kind of when I frame it, and then the tripod comes later. Again, another one that, breaking kind of the rules of light. This was in Sequoia. It was snowing. There was zero light, but I went out anyways and walked around just getting dumped on with snow. There was nothing dramatic. There was, like I said, zero light. But I went out anyways, and I came around a corner and I saw this raven sitting on the foot of this giant sequoia. And I was ready. And I got one frame and it flew away. So that goes when I said it's not a technical talk, but we do need to know our equipment, how to use it quickly and efficiently. I didn't have to fumble with, settings and buttons because I know everything and I can do everything like this. And I kind of had my settings preset for this environment. So all I did here, click, and he flew away. And I love the image. For whatever reason, it reminds me of the Never-Ending Story. Yeah, it looks like the kind of foot of a giant. So, and again, there's no dramatic light here, but this image carries a feeling to it. It definitely has an emotion and a feeling and a sense of scale and solitude and life in it.
Before you go further, on this one, where were you standing? And were you standing straight up or were you down low?
I was standing here like this. I probably would have been almost like directly like this from it. Probably 20 yards. 20 yards away, yeah.
Does that mean you're using long lenses then?
This one, no, like my 28 to 75 is like my workhorse that almost never comes off unless I need something longer. But I have a 16 to 35, and like I said, my brain doesn't like that. It doesn't work well, so I almost never use that one. Does that answer?
So I didn't hear you've got your workhorse, you go longer as well?
I go longer. I use a 70 to 200 if I need it, but I almost rarely ever go back and go wider. That's just not how my brain sees and is comfortable.
I was just gonna ask, so you said the bird flew away, I assume maybe you've got a few shots of it flying away. Is that part of like what you find emotional or that you're looking for is like stillness? You always want something to be stationary?
not necessarily stationary, but it flew away, and it was like ugly fly away, you know, like just the
I was
butt.
noticing amongst all your photos, it's kind of a theme of things that are kind of still.
Yes, I love stillness and calmness. That's kind of what a lot of my, if you look through my portfolio, is you can tell I want to portray that stillness and calmness. And moving subjects don't generally do that, unless you can somehow kind of get a good pan, and get that motion in there, which is super hard to do, and I'm not very good at it. So, so quickly before we move on, if you all think of an image you've ever seen or you've taken that kind of, you felt some sort of emotion, if you're able to think back on why it made it feel that way, it's a good exercise while you're not looking at something. If your brain can, oh yeah, I remember that one image and I liked it for that way. Try to do that from time to time if you do ever want to work on putting some more emotion and feeling into your images. Let's see here. All right, to tell a story or ask a question, I kind of love to do this. And a very good way to create emotion is to leave a little space for the viewer to enter the image, to let them wander, to let them create their, kind of idea of what's happening here. Why does this make me feel this way? You don't necessarily have to spell it out, all of it out for them, but give them a little start or a nudge. Let them go through the image and the frame and figure it out. And again, sometimes our images we're telling a story, and sometimes we're asking a question of the audience and the viewer. Did you have a question on that one?
No, comment. It looks like a bird in the water.
So this one is from Kyrgyzstan, and it's called Serpent and a Swine. And a serpent and swan, because the glacier coming down reminded me of like a snake coming down meeting a swan in the reflection of the water.
Oh, very good. Wow.
Yeah.
How about that? I see it now.
Yeah. This one is from the Grand Tetons. I was with my wife on a ski trip and had to do one day of photography. And I was driving around and I saw some motion on the corner of my eye, and I turned around and I got out of the car and kind of used it as a blind and just sat on the hood. And this coyote was just howling for we spent about an hour together, and I didn't see another animal or another person, so I don't know who was howling at. But to answer your question, so I used a 600 millimeter lens on this one because I was pretty far away. But I also was far enough away that I didn't want to just do a close up of the animal. I wanted that kind of environmental. I needed the tracks in the snow against the dark trees to kind of fill in that whole story of what's going on here. And that's, again, a lot of times when we're dealing with wildlife, we always immediately want to get as tight as possible. But I encourage you to get that one, but also pull out, get the whole scene, tell the whole story of what's going on in the scene. You can tell a much different story than if it was just a close up of a coyote howling. There's not much for the viewer to see in that one. In this version, you can look around in the frame, you can see that you can look at the footprints in the snow, you can look at the trees in the background, and again, your eyes can wander through the frame. Another image from Death Valley. I was, again, 3 hours before sunset with the harsh light. I saw the sun moving across this ridge, and I kind of raced to get over there. And once I did, I saw the kit fox prints in there, and then they're very hard to see on this part here are kangaroo rat tracks. So in my head, I've already got the story. Who was there first? Was, one running from the other or chasing the other? Did the kangaroo rat get away? And then I love that kind of, dark shadow that cuts through the bottom that gives just a little bit of a breathe and a break in the frame before you go through, the rest of the story there. So again, harsh light when most people wouldn't have had their camera out yet. Get it out, look for those contrasts, look for the texture, look for the patterns. And this is, without that, I don't know how I would have gotten the detail in the footprints. And the footprints are kind of the life of the story that give it that emotional attachment to the image here. Another image from Joshua Tree in the Jumbo Rocks area. Again, my favorite area to wander around. Again, kind of waiting, late in the day, waiting for the sun to start setting, but it's still a little bit harsh yet. But I liked that there was that harshness. It kind of, you get the details in the shapes of the rocks a little bit better. And again, there's no drama in the sky that's competing with the rocks in this one. So oftentimes people, the sky there was no color in the sky. If there was clouds and things going on in this image in the background, it would have changed it completely, and I don't know that it would have worked as well. All right. And when pretty isn't enough. We've all been there. We're standing in front of a beautiful scene. The light's good, the composition's good, it works, everything is in place. But when you take the photo and you look at the back of the camera, it's a pretty image, but it's not necessarily beyond that. And sometimes you look at it and you're standing there and you can feel it, but you look at the image on the back of your camera and it's not matching up to how you're feeling while you're there. And it kind of lacks that connection. So, often black and white is how we can merge that gap there, and it's how I use it too. Zabriskie Point in Death Valley. Again, a beautiful sunrise. This is a spectacular place to watch a sunrise if you've never been. It's just incredible. And it's a very pretty image, many people would see it and say it's a pretty image. My mother loves it. She thinks it's very pretty. But for me, it didn't portray, what I was feeling, the coldness that I was, that morning. But also for me, the light was competing with the beauty of the Badlands and the mountains. So when the final image, taking away the kind of the colors that are competing for the textures of the Badlands and the light that was going on, this is how I was able to use the black and white to convey the emotion that I wanted to show in that scene. I think we're near there. Glacier Point, Yosemite National Park. Again, a very pretty image. It was beautiful to be there and standing in front of it. But again, the colors for me are competing. I want, somebody to look at this and feel an emotion and an attachment, even if you've never been to Yosemite, people know Yosemite. And when you convert it to black and white, taking away that color, now you're looking at, the trees, the rocks in the foreground, the grass, the textures in the granite. The obvious subject here is Half Dome, but taking away again the color, you're able to, let your eyes just kind of wander through the frame there.
Can you go back to the colored one for a second?
Sure.
We're gonna go back to the black one. Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right. This is from a secret little slot canyon in southern Utah. and it's one of the most amazing little things that I've ever been into. My friend lives out there and took me into it. And this little arch was just beyond cool when you're walking through and come through it. And the light at that time of day really was giving off these shades of kind of reds and magentas. It was pretty incredible, and it's a very pretty image. I love it, but it doesn't have, again, that when I see it, oh, that's pretty. But when I go to the black and white version, I love it. I want to go back there. I want to be in there. And again, that's me and that's my art. But this is kind of, again, how I portray what I was feeling when I was there. Yes, sir.
When you use what to change it from black and white? Do you use a Photoshop or?
Nowadays, I'm primarily like 90% in Lightroom, and then the last 10 kind of finishing stuff is in Photoshop.
Do anything in the dark room?
No, I'm all digital. Yeah. Yes.
When you begin your process, do you do any editing in color first and with the intention of shifting it to black and white, or do you just move it to black and white and then mess around in that with the?
It depends on the image, honestly. I don't necessarily have a set 1, 2, 3, 4 step process. I look at each image, and if there's a lot of color that needs to be maneuvered around, sometimes I'll do it that way. If I've exposed it correctly, I'll just convert it right away and then kind of build from there. But yeah, a lot of times it depends on the image and how
So
what
this particular one being is almost, when you go back to the color version, it's almost monochromatic itself. I mean, there's
Correct.
maybe 3 or 4 or 5 shades.
Mhm.
There's probably one thing.
and that's I do another presentation where I kind of teach how to see and look in black and white, and so I knew this one, it was exposed. I had to have either completely, dark blacks, or my highlights were going to be a little bit brighter than I wanted, and I went with the darks because I wanted some detail in the whites. So that's why in the black and white version, the whites there are a little bit brighter, just because that's how that was exposed for. And so when I did some of that work first before I converted it, just because I knew that was going to have to happen. Does that long answer? Yeah.
So Andrew, do you see the picture before you shoot? Do you see it in black and white?
Yes.
So all this discussion of color confuses you, doesn't it, when you're taking pictures? Are you looking at it in black and white?
A lot of times, yes, it does. A lot of times it not only confuses me, but it distracts me as well. So I have my my preview on my camera set to black and white, just because it helps me in. Like I said, oftentimes I'll get home. If I don't do that, and there's a tree branch going through the corner of the frame, so I didn't see it because I was distracted by the color of the sunrise or something. So that I always change it. But yes, I have learned how to kind of see the world in black and white, if you will. All right, wrapping up here. And oftentimes, some of my most emotional work didn't come from first impressions. It comes from going back and getting familiar with the place. Returning to that same place will allow you to see beyond the obvious. You kind of stop chasing compositions and start photographing what you're feeling when you're at a place. And I believe, familiarity leads to intimacy with the place and the light and the conditions. And the patterns of everything. The shot is actually El Capitan. I've been there and photographed it many times, but this one day I happened to be there at the right place, right time, and saw this tree kind of come in shadow against the El Cap there. These images again are my Eolian Dunes series from Death Valley. And I've been going and working on this series for years, and I hope that I never stop working on this series. I love it. I love the abstract nature of it. I can just go and walk around in the sand with my camera and just kind of look for the light and look for the textures and look for the patterns. Kind of, it's a nice release, if you will, from having to go somewhere and be in confines of, a certain a space that you're working with. So I often, tell people find, something like this that you're very interested in, that pulls on you, and you keep going back to find a way that it kind of make it a little bit different. Yes.
At what time of the day do you like to shoot those videos?
Pretty much any day except for noon. Any time except for noon. I mean, I love the morning. I love the afternoon. It depends on, where I am and what time of year, because the sun moves around a little bit. So sometimes in the morning it's better. The afternoon. And again, I'd like to go at different times so that I can see something new, and it'll kind of spark my curiosity a little bit. Let's see here. Another one from Yosemite here. This is in one of the meadows there, right when my car was 5 feet from where I was. It's right on the roadside. I've gone by there many, many of times. And I've seen this group of trees, and I've always wanted to photograph them, but they're always, you can't see them once you pick up your camera because the trees just get lost with everything in the background. But I was there on a trip, and I happened to get lucky, and it snowed, and the snowfall just covered up the granite background and the trees behind, and it let me focus on, what is the subject here, which is these row of trees. And so again, had I not gone back many times, I may not have gotten this. And often, like I said, I loved this image. It had some emotional attachment to me, but I do a lot of art fairs and art shows, and I had this 14 by 42 framed. And this girl came into my booth, and she just stood there for 5 minutes and didn't say a word. And she left. And she came back with her husband. And she said, I'm taking it. And then she told me the story about how she had lost her mom and dad within the same year. And this reminded her of her parents and her 3 siblings. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't cry. So when yes, when I was there, the emotional attachment to me was the beauty of Yosemite and the trees and the natural environment. I obviously didn't know then that I was going to create such an emotional image for somebody else, which is, another bonus, but I may not have created this image if I didn't have that desire to create that type of images, if that makes sense. All right. Still doing all right? I got just a couple more to go here. Good. Again, another one from Death Valley. This is Ibex Dunes, been there many, many of times, and again, just wandering around a new section, waiting for the light, and I didn't know that the moon was gonna come up like this. Got super lucky, but again, I was there, I was ready, I was able to look in a different way and see it differently and compose it, adding the bushes, waiting for, I could have waited for better light, if you will, but the moon would have been way up and out of the sky. Let's see here. We'll go in quickly. We weren't going to talk about rules. I think personally in black and white photography works well, but also when you want to portray a sense of emotion and really tell what your subject is. Everybody says never put your subject in the center of a frame. I do it all the time. I love to do it when it works and when the image calls for it. Again, a foggy morning. The fog kind of helped isolate the tree in the foreground from everything else. Needed the reflection in here to complete the story, because it's kind of, is the story the tree or the reflection? but really putting it all smack dab in the center was the only way that this composition worked. Putting it off center, rule of thirds, it didn't work and wouldn't have worked. Same thing for this one. You know, the details of the water droplets and the rose leaves. I could have tried to offset it a little bit, but then it would have just looked like I purposely offset an image. Where putting it in the middle of the frame is drawing your eye right into the middle of the frame, which is where I wanted it to be. Zion National Park. I saw this branch sticking out of the river. Tons of people walking by, nobody looked at it. I had my camera on the tripod. What are you looking at? The beautiful stick in the front. And then just walked by me. But that's what I saw. That was my vision. That's what I saw. Again, trying to do some rule of third composition wouldn't have worked and it would have looked weird. But there's no doubt that the subject is the stick here. And then I used a long exposure a little bit to get some movement into the bubbles of the water here. You know, and it's a very simple scene. There's not a lot going on. There's a stick, some water, and some bubbles. But, you know, giving it, oftentimes when we put subjects in the middle, it gives them the strength. And if that's the emotion we're trying to go through, you know, giving your subject that strength, putting it in the middle can go a long way with doing that. We went in a little bit with editing. That could be its whole separate discussion on editing and how to edit for different feelings and emotions. So we don't have time for that today, but there's a lot that can go into editing. And I edit with intention. I don't just go in and start moving sliders around to see what happens. I often know what I want, or I see it as I'm going, and one building block starts to, you know, lead to another. This one, I call it Dance of Tranquility. They reminded me of two ballet dancers on a stage. Again, I loved the soft pastel light of the sunset there, but for me, it was, the light was, even though it's soft light, it was taking away from the subject of the image. And to me, that's, now the rocks are the subjects, and you can see the story that I had in my head and the vision that I was going for as I was standing there. One more from Death Valley. You know, the sun had pretty much already gone down. There wasn't a whole lot of light left. There was just a little bit kind of illuminating a few faces of the sand there. The color image is pretty lifeless, pretty flat. But when you convert it and you focus on the little bit of light that was there and the contrast, and you using that to my advantage to make it into a different story here. Sorry, I'm going fast in the last section. So, final thoughts here. Creating emotional images isn't just something you can force or formulaically produce. A lot of it comes down to presence, from patience, from practice, from an environment, from weather. But, you know, trust your instincts when you're out there. If something is kind of pulling at you, kind of that's often more reliable than any technical things that you know. Trust your gut and your feeling. And when you're out there or you're back at your screen editing your images, just pause and ask yourself, you know, what do I want the image to say? What do I want someone to feel when they look at this image? And that's where kind of emotional photography starts. Not necessarily in the gear or in the sliders, but your intention and what you were feeling when you were there in the field. So with that, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And hopefully no one fell asleep.
Isolation, emotion, going back to the same place? It sounds like you've got a process that you've developed.
Yeah, not intentionally, but that's, yes.
Now, we've had a couple of gear questions. We talked about lenses. What about camera bodies?
I'm on a Sony A7R3, so it's pretty old by today's standards, but it works. It does its job beautifully. The marketing departments are really trying to get me to upgrade, but it works for what I need.
So you don't have to have the latest and greatest in order to take great images?
No, Sony has loaned me the newest ones, and they create these big, beautiful files that want to hog, the resources of my computer, but they themselves don't make me see differently. It's just a camera with pixels, and although mine doesn't have an articulating screen, so when I go vertical, I have to do, and I got one of the Sonys that had that, and this might. But no, people ask me that, and I said I do workshops, and I have people all the time. What kind of camera? The best one that you can afford. I mean, it doesn't. Most of them, the sensors are good sensors, and it's just the features that they have. Is from a mid-level camera to a super expensive one. It's just the extra gadgets. It's get one that you can afford and invest in good quality lenses.
Any other questions?
What program is used to edit the picture?
Like I said, I'm like 90% of it is in Lightroom, and then I do some final steps in Photoshop.
Photoshop, just Photoshop?
Uh-huh. Yeah, for like the few bits. Yes, sir.
Is that Point Loma?
It is.
Good call.
We've had some successful photographers come through here and give talks.
Uh-huh.
And, that have expensive gear, but, 1/3 of their photos we found were shot on iPhones or Samsung.
Yeah.
That they were actually selling. Have you had any luck with that type of photography with
Me?
cell phones?
I'm using a really old, I have an iPhone 12. So, yeah, not quite a flip phone, but almost. Well, my wife has a new one, and it's freaking amazing. The new iPhone, and it's really, I mean, unless you need that 600 millimeters to get a coyote howling, iPhones are amazing what they can do, and you can get a beautiful raw file out of an iPhone. Yes, sir.
How important is it, Andrew, to set your screen on black and white?
For me, it's
Trying to become emotional.
For me, it's very important. Again, I get distracted really easy by color. So it helps taking away the color and using the black and white on the screen. Now I've just distilled it, and I see what I see in my brain. And that, again, I've learned to kind of see in black and white, if that makes any bit of sense. So even though I'm looking in color, as soon as I look at my camera and I see it in color, I get confused and jumbled. So I also teach a lot of people, even if you're going to shoot a scene in color, view it in a black and white mode, just to get rid of that color distraction. And oftentimes you'll see that your composition is just a little bit off, or you notice there's a bush coming through here that you didn't see because the sunset was beautiful. So even if you are going to stick with just doing color every now and if you're somewhere and you love that composition in that scene, just most of the camera nowadays is just a couple of buttons right on the dial, flip it over to black and white just to make sure you got it dialed in.
Well, Andrew has to go back to San Diego, but he will be here for a little bit while to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Hopefully.
All right, field trips, contests, make sure you're entering your photos. Look forward to seeing you guys. Make sure you put the shares away, and great to have you.
Sorry if I rambled on there for a little bit, got away from me.
Perfect, thank you. There was a question about using a light meter or just what's in the.
Just on the camera.
Just in the camera?
Yeah. But it depends on the scene. I use all the different modes. So I don't just set it, forget it on,
When you say different modes?
for like, am I exposing for, like when you're in meter mode, you can do highlight.
Yeah, like matrix or spot metering or anything like that. Yeah.
The one of the bird in the lake. I couldn't blow out the highlights. Because the whole thing would have been ruined, so I exposed for the highlights on the bird there.
Oh, beautiful images. You clearly.
Thank you.
Mastered your craft and know your.
I wouldn't say
know
master,
your
but
gear.
I know where I want to get to, and I'm on the way there.
That progress is so encouraging.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. Oh, thank you, thank
I
you,
enjoyed that.
thank you, appreciate it.
Kept thinking, okay, what emotion am I feeling?
Exactly.
How do I win a competition? No, not that, not that.
Uh,
I was, I don't.
So it's
Emotion
funny,
when I'm taking shots.
it's funny.
They move.
Yes,
I definitely move.
for sure. Yeah. I think a lot of us, when we think, we live in a day and age where emotion is a woo, woo, woo feeling. It's not what I take from it when I look at emotional photography. It's just, thank you.
All right, let me hit stop recording.
Yes.